Hello and welcome back to GameSpot's coverage of E3 2013. We're about, feels like halfway through day one here. We've had a bunch of games on the show floor already here. We've had Skylanders Swap Force, we've had Killzone Shadowfall, but this next one, pretty excited about this game. I'm very happy to be joined by Morgan Gray for the Bureau XCOM Declassified. Morgan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, mate. How are you?
Great. How's it like to be down here? You usually based up in 2K Marin with its wonderful foggy, wet.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, we're same coastline, an hour flight. I love LA. It's nice to be down here. Get a little heat for a change.
Absolutely. This is a game that a lot of people have been looking forward to seeing actual gameplay of for a long time. Obviously, back in, was it 2010 E3? There was I don't know, was it a pre-viz or was it gameplay of a project that you had? You've gone through a procedure where the RTS games have come out, and now we're back, and I guess the XCOM franchise is in a really strong place at the moment, and you guys are going to tackle it with this new first-person franchise. Yeah,
absolutely. So in 2010, we sort of showed an expression of this game that was a little more tension terror. And I think for us, we were realizing in our development that one of the core tenets of XCOM is like tactics and teamwork.
Yeah.
So we actually showed a preview of what we have today in 2011, the direction we're going. Sort of third-person, squad-based tactical combat.
Behind closed doors? Or?
Mostly behind closed doors,
okay.
Not for public consumption. And then we've been iterating and refining and like getting that formula just right to show it now in through the world this E3 and coming out pretty soon in August, actually.
A lot of people assumed that project had actually been canned, and there was a sort of a lack of maybe communication, probably because the other game was coming out and focused towards that. So are you saying that it was basically an iterative process, that it just took that time?
Exactly. So once we showed in 2011, we wanted to take our time to try. We're doing new gameplay. We're doing some experiments actually. We're trying to do a third-person real-time expression of that core turn-based XCOM. And it took a while to get the formula right. And then for us, on top of that experiment, we also were working on the narrative, the plot, and get everything to sing together. So it was funny, thought that the game got canceled. Glad it didn't, because, it's been very cold in the Bay Area. But I think now that we're so close to coming out, we're ready to show the world how it's all come together. And hopefully people can get excited about where we're taking the franchise.
Awesome. So what we're looking at here is the first gameplay, I guess, of the Bureau XCOM Declassified. You guys have had a couple of sizzle trailers in the past, kind of 3 weeks. There's been 3 different ones. This is the first time anyone's seeing it. Visually, it looks quite similar to what you guys had back in 2010. What are the sort of main differences? Because I have a feeling that people kind of have that in the back of their head as this is what this game looks like. So
totally.
What are we talking about?
Well, we'll talk some similarities. So we're telling the origin story of the XCOM franchise. For the first time ever, you're going to be there the day that XCOM itself was founded. We take place back in 1962, which is where some of the art style feels familiar. Previously, we were playing in the 50s, but we like the 60s. One, because it's right there, the space race, right? NASA going to the moon. What a great backdrop to tell an alien story. Cold War, exactly. The tension between the United States, USSR, missiles pointed everywhere. Everyone's thinking that it's about to go nuclear right here in our world, and then have extraterrestrials attack. So you play as William Carter, him and his squad of XCOM agents, a squad that he's recruited, customized, leveled up for various levels at this point, are here in Pima, New Mexico, trying to make contact with another XCOM operative. The idea here, again, is to take that turn-based sort of strategic sandbox tactical gameplay of the classic XCOM formula and give it that immersion of you being a battlefield commander with your feet on the ground, where the bullets are flying. So as Carter proceeds down the street of Pima, New Mexico, we're going to get to the heart of what I think is the coolest thing of our experiment, that's focused on real-time tactical combat. So you can see we have some familiar enemies. We have sectoids that were actually enslaved by one of our primary alien races. We have the menagerie of aliens in our gameplay. And Carter here has brought up battle focus. Now this is a tactical interface in which you can give real time, albeit a little slowed down, to sort of capture the tension of battle commands to your agents. You're able to do such maneuvers as forcing flanks on your agents, prioritizing targets, and unleashing the various powers and abilities that they have. Our goal here, if you're an old school sort of gamer or an old time nerd, is to find that difference, to use Aliens as an example, between being Gorman back in the APC, watching the action through monitors, safe and sound, and Hicks out there where the bullets are flying, where all the danger is.
This is a lot more strategic than I think a lot of people have been expecting. It's actually quite refreshing and interesting to see this because
awesome.
It's been like I guess I was expecting a first-person shooter, which is no bad thing if it's done uniquely. But you guys seem pretty heavy on the strategy stuff. Is that paused or is that slowed down?
It's slowed down. We're trying to simulate the sort of dilation of time that a commander feels in the battlefield, but it's still very much real time. You can get killed in that mode. Your agents can drop. We want to keep the tension up. I like that you find it refreshing. Obviously, we saw a lot of sort of misunderstanding of what we're doing. People going, oh, it's just a shooter with XCOM on it. But again, our charter was defined tactical squad combat control. What I've said, talk with the team, and one of our things we would say is what we're basically doing is squad versus squad combat. But versus Delta Force versus Spetsnaz, it's XCOM versus aliens. So we treat things for good, for keeps. We treat them very realistically. Flanking is a key component, getting that tactical advantage of the battlefield, and really utilizing your squad in an intelligent, smart manner as a key for success versus just Rambo run and gun.
So just to let people know if they have any questions, and I'm sure they will at this stage, to tweet me at Danny O'Dwyer. So I'll log into my Twitter again, and I'll be sure to pass those questions on to Morgan. I've got more than a few myself though. At the moment, so your Carter, the character you're playing, he's the commander of these troops. Can you take control over those? And if not, what happens if you die as Carter? Is it mission over? Or?
Yep. When you die as Carter, it's definitely mission over. And we're not trying to sort of diminish the experience of being a squad leader by letting you jump in. Now your agents are autonomous, so autonomously, pretty smart. They're capable of defending themselves, relocating, dodging grenades. But it's up to you and the decisions you make, the tactics that you use, to forge them into an actual team.
Okay.
And it's the coordinated tactics that are going to be critical for success. Again, I just cannot stress how much of this game is trying to emulate the smart, coordinated strikes of a tightly coordinated team beating what is always going to be a numerically and technologically superior force. So you can kind of even see, remove aliens from your mind, or don't, because aliens are XCOM and they're awesome. Yeah. You're seeing leapfrog tactics. You're seeing them stack up on the flanks, using diversionary powers to sort of pull aggro from enemies, opening up opportunities to press forward. You can also see through this interface, you're getting that classic XCOM information feed. Lines of sight, threats, where you're visible, where you're vulnerable, target probabilities based on where you're positioned in the battlefield. All these are data points, the sort of information we're giving you, the commander, so that you can sort of grok this layout, observe the layout of the enemies, observe what the battlefield can do for you, then use it all in sort of your tool chest to come up with a solution for the problem.
In a weird way, this is kind of reminding me of that era where we had games like Tom Clancy's Rogue Spear and Rainbow Six and stuff, where they were kind of, you had a squad of people, and then in an instance you'd have maybe 2 or 3 enemies, and you basically had to ensure that by the time that exchange was finished, that your guys were okay, those guys were dead, and you'd use as little of your resources as possible.
Those games were inspirations. I mean, the old Clancy games for sure, classic Rainbow, even some like going for some people way back to like Full Spectrum Warrior on Xbox One.
Is that way back?
Well, it's not way back for me, but I think it's way back for a few. Like, it still seems kind of recent, right?
We're not that old.
Well, we're not that. I'm old enough where I got the demo on a floppy disk of the first XCOM, and XCOM has never left any of my PCs since that point.
You're lucky. I had it on Amiga 600 and it was 12 discs.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. There's a few guys on our team that actually played it on PS1, which I think is cool. I'm like, wow, that's awesome.
I didn't even know that was out until a couple of years ago.
Yeah. But yeah, those sort of military squad versus squad games, the emphasis on tactics, were all things that we drew a lot of inspiration from, and then try to find that expression of that classic XCOM DNA, putting it forward in the bureau over here.
So in terms of the chronology of the series, this I guess would take place before absolutely anything.
It's the first tale of XCOM, and so what we wanted to do was basically take that Cold War backdrop, take that setting, and say what it would have been like if we had an organization that was dedicated to defending America against a foreign threat, i.e. the Soviet Russia, and we expanded our concept of what foreign meant to mean people that didn't come from our planet. And so this bureau rechristens itself XCOM. You are literally there the day XCOM is founded, and part of the reason why. And we want, I think as an XCOM fan, generally not known for its narrative, there's something very cool about witnessing that story unfold and being part of that. While at the same time, being out there in the early fights, like, using 1960s technology when we start off to face the enemies. Now, previously you saw here something, where we went into an upgrade screen. The cool thing about Carter and his agents is as you fight and gain experience points, you're going to be able to rank up and customize both him and his agents with new powers and abilities.
Can agents die, and then is there permadeath for those
Oh yes,
guys,
when
or?
an agent drops, he's gone for good.
Oh man,
and
you guys are sticking nice to the tough parts of XCOM.
No, everyone's ready for games. Like, it's not, what I like to say is it's not just difficulty, it's like skillful play. And the cool thing about XCOM as a franchise is it's a game that demands and rewards skillful play. When an agent drops, he's down for good. And our game is kind of especially harsh because it's not like we have a strategic sandbox where you can delay and sort of go on grind missions. The main narrative, the war effort, the campaign is constantly moving forward. So if you're not managing your roster, if you're not trying to keep a bunch of guys on the sidelines, a good enough level to keep up, you may find yourself in some pretty tough missions where you're coming out with some noobs. And you're like, oh, I really miss Roger. Too bad he died on the last ops.
Roger was such a great sniper. So in terms of the history of the franchise, then you guys are kind of in a way breathing new life into games that have already existed. Is there any sort of rule set as to what exactly is canon in it? Like, is Enforcer part of canon?
I mean, ask different XCOM fans and get different answers. I think personally the stance we took at Game is it's all canon, and we think we've developed a story that is supportive and contributive to the XCOM franchise to date without, sort of moving anything and saying, this never happened or this didn't happen. It took some time, but we think we found a way to support what has come before.
I guess doing it in this time frame as well, doing it in this era, because you're obviously doing a different genre, it kind of gets away the problem of having to use shared assets or to like really stick tight to the current Xbox games or XCOM games, especially XCOM, which is the real-time strategy, just came out last year.
It gave us some liberties, which helps. So there are some ties, like you'll see some visual similarities that we think are sort of touchstones to the franchise, things like, cover and covered in ice shields, some of the UI iconography. You'll notice like our little sectoids, one of the sort of spoiler things that we postulate is that our primary enemy, the Zujari, actually enslaved the sectoids. And here you'll see them with slave colors on, brought them to our planet for the first time. So in our story, the first time sectoids come to Earth, they're enslaved by another enemy. Now don't feel sympathy for them. I like to say it's like the goblins to the Urarque. They're all jerks, but after this experience, the sectoids definitely know where Earth is on the map when they come back again in the future.
So will that arc of that particular combat between those two alien races, will that be sort of resolved by this, or are you guys?
Yeah, by the end of our story, we will draw our tale to a nice and tidy close.
Okay.
A close that will actually have some influence based on what you decide to do in the game. So the players still have some choice on what they're and the outcome. But we set ourselves up, we throw the ball up for the future XCOMs to come. Now you can see here, like even in like the sort of simple fights, there is a good combination between squad-based combat and the ability to sometimes just run out and punch bad guys right in the face. We're hoping that the players can feel what we like to say, if you compare combating aliens to a sport, we like to say combat quarterback. No, I mean, I'm sorry, it's Yankee football rules. It's American.
Fine. So I know. So telling people what to do, but also taking the ball.
Yeah, but taking the ball, but being very much on the field. Like it's never safe. You can never just put the controller down, stroke your chin and go, oh, what I'm going to do now. It's that visceralness, that real-time aspect that we think hopefully takes a few people that have seen XCOM as a franchise before and go, well, that's really not my thing. I don't like turn-based. And they might try this because it seems a little more up their alley. Our hope is to bring them to the XCOM fold and ultimately make them XCOM fans. That may go, I'm going to try more XCOM and play the more traditional XCOM games like Enemy Unknown, which is excellent. And then for classic XCOM fans, give them a new perspective into the universe, a new perspective into the gameplay, which is refreshing and feels fun.
We were talking, Morgan, before we went live about some of the older games. I was a massive fan of them on PC and on the Commodore. I was incredibly shocked by the success that the franchise had 2 years ago. I was kind of like Syndicate. It was one of those franchises I'd never really expected to see again.
Yep.
How did you guys feel about this resurgence? Do you feel like it's
I think it's. I mean, it's super happy. I mean, you can't overstress. Like the guys at Firaxis did a bang up job on that game. That game is amazing. I mean, they started right from amazing source material, but there's still a very Firaxis spin, and that is a studio that makes great titles. And pretty much there's not a game they make that isn't on one of my gaming devices. But I think the thing that outside of just how fun a game it was to play, was that it showed, like other games, like the sort of Demon Souls, that the market is such that gamers are back to the point where they can have games that don't babysit them.
Yeah.
They don't just put, the pacifier in the mouth and you're just basically hitting buttons to the next cutscene, like how they used to be, right? And I like all types of games. I'm never gonna diminish any game because I like them all. But it's nice to see games that have that part of the gameplay loop in them, where the game itself is difficult and challenging, and the story is great, and that story can be supported with great cinematics. But the loop, the thing that you're doing, is giving you challenges, and you feel like a proper hero when you're able to circumvent that. So it's great to see that there is an audience for that again, and I think that bodes well for where games are going in the future. Like kind of like where network TV went from some really good TV to some garbage, and now we're back to good TV. I'm hoping that games are following that loop where we've gone from like super hardcore games in the Commodore Amiga days to a little more mass games, and now there's enough gamers where we can do different types of things, different genres, and different vibes, and there's a big enough audience for all those things to support it.
Yeah, amen. Me too, brother. I've got so many questions about this game, but I'm going to throw some out to the folks who are tweeting at me. If you tweet at Daniel Dwyer, I'll make sure I get your question over if I can make sure I have time. David Doran at Sin for Profit on the website and of course on Twitter asks, does this game have in between combat mission management hub, kind of like the Firaxis game? Is there any team management stuff outside of the missions itself?
So there's absolutely team management. So in between all the primary missions, you can think of the game like an RPG. There's primary quest missions and then secondary quest lines. You go back to XCOM HQ, and the XCOM HQ evolves over time. Now you as William Carter, you're a battlefield officer. So your job is to lead the team out in the field. You're not building onto the base. Like the joke we sometimes have is, battlefield officer, not office manager.
Sure.
But back at the HQ, you are recruiting agents. You are customizing them with different kit, whether powers and abilities or weapons and whatnot. And the base itself is both a social hub where you'll interact with primary characters and a proper quest zone in its own right. There's side quests and secondary quests within the base that both push the story and the fullness of the narrative forward and offer some unique viewpoints into this fledgling XCOM as it starts to get off its feet. So the strategic aspects of the game are all primarily feeding your team out in the battlefield itself.
Yeah.
And the customization therein goes through that channel.
Okay. Is there any talk about multiplayer at all in this?
No, the focus is all on single player. We decided very early on that because we're giving you this real-time squad-based control, and in many ways giving you, I don't want to come off as a braggart, but we're giving you a level of control that's not commonly found in most games. And what you can do with AI between an emphasis on positional and movement and prioritization of target, not just firing off of powers, that we didn't want to dilute our focus from putting on what we worried would be something that felt tacked on. So we're going to tell a story about an individual, William Carter, and focus on this gameplay, which is kind of experimental for us, and really try to hone that in.
I've had a couple of questions in as well about platforms. This game is current gen title, correct?
Sure, yeah, current gen, Xbox 360, PS3, and PC, coming out on August 20th.
When you look at this game, what other games that have currently come out? Because it does feel like a sort of a harp back to a bygone era, but not necessarily real-time strategy, but it definitely in terms of tactical combat. What other games do you think at the moment have you taken inspiration from, or has this been very much a rebirth type of thing?
Well, I think everyone making games as gamers, you get your inspiration from all over the place. So obviously we took a lot of inspiration from classic XCOM, as well as Firaxis' XCOM, which, as I said, is excellent. And then we look for things like, the Fallout series, their transition from the isometric 2D Fallout 2 to the third-person / first-person Fallout.
One of only a few games that successfully made that transition.
Yeah, made that transition. We took a lot of notes, and for us, Battle Focus is our expression of the turn-based in real time, much like VATS was a harkening back to the 2D when they went to 3D. So we sort of looked at that game a lot and went, you guys, you paved the way. Obviously, Battle Focus using the monorail, there's some nods to learning from Mass Effect in terms of how they decided to lay out things. But again, one of the key differences for us is our game also focuses more heavily on position and tactics versus just firing off of powers. So it helped inspire, but obviously we had to bring a lot more to the table. Then inspiration.
At the moment, is it Smeeth, bottom left?
Sneath and Jones, your two agents. And
Sneath is down at the moment?
Sneath
dead.
is now dead.
Oh, Sneath's gone.
Yeah, Sneath failed to be able to dance with the Muton. One of the cool things here is just because it's always 3 against 1, this single Muton in our game is an individual badass.
Yeah.
And you really have to use coordinated tactics to take him down. The player here failed, and Sneath is he's a casualty.
You're gonna have to write a really bad letter to Sneath's family now.
Exactly. He's going to make the memorial wall. We're going to remember Sneath when we return back home. But it's harsh, right? Because Sneath was level 3. That's at least a mission's worth of experience points that just got gambled away. And one of the cool things in our game, and certainly for third-person games, is like with death a part of any combat, every combat matters in a way that it is more than just, and I fought some guys to a checkpoint. Like you'll think back to certain fights and go, oh, that wasn't so great, because you'll feel the repercussions down the road.
Well, I guess we're kind of in the past couple of years with that for Axis game, and also kind of like the rejuvenation of roguelikes in the past couple of years. The idea of permadeath to any character in a game is coming back, but it's kind of the first time we've seen it in a open first, a shooter, third-person type experience. I wonder if it's probably going to shock people when they...
Yeah, let's say that's the thing. We definitely know that like some people are going to be surprised. And it was interesting. You were mentioning before the sort of misconceptions about what the game was, from just sort of like, run and gun shooter, or BioShock with aliens was the joke of our BioShock 2 history.
Totally.
It is a different type of game, and I think only when seeing it work on all cylinders, see all the parts come together between the emphasis on team tactics and how it plays out, will players be able to understand that we actually are trying something kind of experimental, which we're keen to see the types of people that are going to like what we've done here, because we know that we won't be everyone's cup of tea. Just the same way that XCOM itself isn't everyone's cup of tea. But we think we found a very earnest expression of the franchise.
Oh man, what madness is going on here?
Oh, this is so the aliens, the Zujari. One of the first things they did in their opening salvos was enslave, infect a huge portion of the American population with a virus. We call it the Sleepwalker virus. These sort of very reminiscent of War of the Worlds control towers are the mechanism in which they activate the Sleepwalkers and use them as a sort of behind the lines combatant / spy.
Are they like converted humans, or are they regular humans that are switched on then?
They're converted humans that can get switched on. Their fate being one of the things that you'll be dealing with throughout the course of the narrative, and again have some impacts on. And our hope here, again, by going 1962, not only giving it a good narrative backdrop, an interesting time period to tell a story in, it gives us some very unique visual places to go to. So we're not just doing, we're staying away from Attack on Manhattan or Attack on Washington, D.C., and telling a war that's happening in the suburbs. Like we're off Route 66, what we call the nooks and crannies of America. Where, many games are going to have a battle in someone's backyard for a child's birthday party, while you fight aliens that are like terraforming.
So are these covert ops then on some of them? Or are the population aware of this threat?
So because we're also, not only under threat from the aliens, but we still have several thousand missiles pointed at us from the USSR.
Wait, the Russians, they're still angry?
They're still,
I thought this might be like a Dr. Manhattan situation where they're like, common enemy.
Oh, no, not in 62. Like if we're on the ropes, that's an opportunity for Russia, right?
Yeah.
So we are, XCOM is trying to keep it hidden. Now, we're not like shooting anyone who sees anything in the street, but it is an attempt to keep it a covert operation to a degree, what we sort of call the erase the truth. We're trying to tell XCOM is both trying to defeat the aliens as well as make sure the world at large doesn't know how close we are to, being on the ropes.
So this invasion is predominantly in North America. It's only...
Yes, we're it's a little jingoistic. I apologize to our international fans. But we thought it'd be an interesting story to tell.
I'm sorry your friends and family won't be subjugated to an alien invasion.
Yes, exactly. You're safe still. In the future, they'll go for the world. But right now, it's just the Americans. But yeah, we are telling it, it started in America. We do hope in certain ways to explore some of the implications to the rest of the world. Minor teaser there, but cool. We are starting just in the States and then taking it from there.
What's this silicoid he's using?
So the silicoid is actually a classic XCOM enemy. It's one of the many classic menagerie of aliens it's bring in. During the course of the game, Carter is able to get the ability to deploy his own. So where your agents come in different classes, recon, commando, engineer, each specialized kind of like an RPG class.
Is Carter just a set class? Or?
Carter's set class is effectively the deployer. Think of him as the pet class, because he's the commander. It makes sense for us. And you personalize him with the different powers and abilities. Now, in addition to the powers themselves, we have what we call perks, which are a way to do things to further personalize each of your agents in your roster. You have a roster of 8. And it's things like, I may be a commando, but I am better at dishing out damage type of commando, or I am better at taking damage. Our goal, again, trying to give the player a lot of control over his tool set, and so that he can decide how to put it together. Now, we're getting to the end of this gameplay. We've pushed on through, and we're cleaning out the rest of these Zujari. Ultimately, the goal here is to gain access to this alien tower where the XCOM organization just trying to extract the data to find from whence these bad guys are coming. Because, you know, it's not an XCOM game if you don't bring the fight to them.
Absolutely.
Ultimately. Hopefully it's not too big of a spoiler for people, but if you played an XCOM game, you know, at some point, you know, we're going to be ditching, you know, this 1962 clothing for something a little more protective of environments that don't have air, you know, as it were. But, you know, as you can see, and you know, obviously if this is online for people to see, there's tons of different, you know, ways you can combine your different powers and abilities. And even Carter himself here is prone to getting dropped, forcing your agent to come and get you back off the ground, hopefully to recover you in time to defeat.
Are the level structure, is it more like a linear action game where you've got set levels you have to do? Is there any choosing levels?
So there is a spine of primary missions, which runs in a linear fashion. In that spine, there are junction points where the player can choose secondary operations. Sort of at
painting a great visual picture here.
Yeah, exactly. There is a spine, and then you connect vital organs.
Vertebrae.
Yeah, vertebrae. And these sort of secondary operations are a great place to take agents in your roster that may or may not be your primary and get them boosted up so you have a great sort of roster of guys in case you lose someone. They're also a great place to go and find new hidden objects out in the environment, bring them back so you can equip your guys with new equipment in the battlefield, and unique little stories in their own right. There's also what we call dispatch missions, which are passive missions that allow you, the player, to send a bunch of agents on that you don't go on to sort of boost up their XP in the background.
Do you play through those yourself as well?
No, you send them out in the world. You say, you 5, go do this. When you come back, hopefully you leveled up.
They get the ability to fail maybe if they're not at a certain level.
Yeah, if you don't you know, sort of manage it right. They cannot die in those missions because we figure we kill them in enough other places that we didn't want to be total jerks, right?
Harsh.
But again, it just sort of points and illustrates how important agent roster management is to the overall game. So our hope again is to find a game that is getting the player not just in their trigger finger but in their brain. They're using smart decisions out in the battlefield and how they combat things. They're using smart decisions back at the base of how they're getting ready for the next operation, for the next advancement of the campaign, and then bringing that all to bear in the game, which for us feels like a proper expression of the XCOM franchise.
It's a really rudimentary, redundant question a lot of the time, but it's something that is always asked 1,001 times. In terms of the campaign length, what type of ballpark are you talking about?
This is always hard, right? Always hard to answer because we play it faster.
Sure.
But I feel like for a proper playthrough, engaging with most of the content, really digging into it, we're going to be easily on the other side of 12 hours. Cool. Like we're not a very short game. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of gameplay. There's a lot of story. There's a lot of interactions that the players can choose to, to get in, sink their teeth into. So we feel pretty good about that length.
Cool. I want to go away from 1 second away from XCOM. Morgan, you've been in the game for a long time.
Yeah.
We've had some pretty interesting revelations over the past 48 hours in terms of Microsoft and Sony.
Yeah.
When it comes to this whole used games thing, obviously it's not going to affect XCOM because it's coming out on current generation stuff. But what's your personal take on the idea of used games being allowed or disallowed?
So my personal take on that is I think we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes for everyone. Like I think obviously showing off the Bureau, representing 2K, we'll want to keep it more focused on what we're doing ourselves. Personally, I think, I've been in games for a long time. I think, we will see how it goes. I think the exciting thing about this generation in general is it's fresh. There's a lot of new players, whether it's things like Ouya or NVIDIA's portable. Steam has brought a renaissance back to PC, which makes me smile, and the big boys got good hardware out for both the boxes. So I think at a minimum, what I'll say personally, it's going to be a very interesting time to watch how it pans out. And I think without hyperbole, it is actually, I think we're on the precipice of a revolutionary time to be a gamer, both how the industry works, the types of games being made, and how fans and consumers can interact and purchase and play. I think it's a very cool time.
This is only my second E3. I'm guessing you've done more than
a couple.
Your fair share. How do you think this feels? Because I think maybe, personally anyway, last week I was feeling one way about how the industry was going. With the past 48 hours, with some of the games we've seen here over the past couple of days, it's injected me with a sense of confidence, especially in relation to consoles, which I think have been very much PC focused. Yeah. What do you think when you're roaming the halls here at the LACC about the current,
it's a good E3. It's a good E3. There's a lot of substance to E3, and not a lot of sizzle. There's a lot of great games on display. Even the format, the layout seems more about the products, more about the games.
Yeah.
Less about, here's an army of booth babes, here's whatever. It feels more, again, like it's more about the content. And in some ways, for me, I think this E3 is a standout because I felt the same way. I was like, another E3, here it goes. It's all going to be schmaltzy show. But it does feel a lot more like, games continue to grow up. The industry is legitimate, and the focus is more on what's being made and the people playing it, and less on the sort of razzle-dazzle smoke screen. So I feel pretty good. We'll see how the rest of the show goes, but already I think it's been a pretty solid E3 for me.
Awesome. Morgan, thanks very much for joining me. Could you tell the guys at home one last time what consoles and when will we see the Bureau XCOM Declassified?
Sure. So the Bureau's coming out in North America on August 20th, internationally August 23rd. The safe internationals who aren't going to be invaded by aliens unless they buy the Bureau.
Yeah.
We're going to come out on Xbox 360, PS3, and PC. And I'd just like to appreciate the time, being able to show the game off, have the chat, had a lot of fun.
Not at all. Thanks for showing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
We got loads more content coming up here on Stage 2, folks. E3.gamespot.com and twitch.tv/GameSpot E3 Stage 2. I still can't believe I haven't forgotten that one. League of Legends fans will be very happy to know that Team Solo Mid will be up in a second. I'm taking a break. Travis Gafford will be up here, but we've got bunches of new games. John Vignocchi's going to be on with Disney Infinity. Madness. Battlefield 4. You got to keep tuning in here. Talk to you soon.
Sweet.